Anyway, so welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. So here's where I really, because none of you, all of you, we have decided in the past are just artificial intelligent bots here to entertain me, or at least keep me occupied on a Monday evening, while presumably some nefarious plan is being put into operation elsewhere, which would be foiled if it were not for me. But it's obviously because I'm being occupied by you guys. It isn't being foiled. So there we go. That's obviously the purpose of all this. The sun never sets. I love it. Anyway, it is lovely to see you all. It is lovely to see you all. So thank you for coming along and saying hello and being part of whatever it is that we're part of here. Bot alert. Yes, exactly right. Yes, right. So you. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be. I'm just a figment of your imagination. It's a very concerning thing to be a figment of my imagination. I'd have thought. But there we go. Yeah, digressing already. Of course, it's a tradition. Dear, it's all good. It's all good. So yeah, so Monday. It feels like it's been a long day. I don't know. I had to do some work. That's never puts me in a good mood. I've still got a bit of a mountain to climb with my current work in progress. I went through Doom Dark's Revenge today, and which is my fantasy novel I'm currently working on, which is based on a 1985 computer game, for those of you who don't know, from the 80s, that glorious decade. And I've still got quite a lot of work to do. I've realised I've got like about 7 or 8 scenes and probably 3-4 chapters worth to write. So, and then I've got all the editing slog, so it's like, it was a bit kind of like anyway. But I'm getting there. But it's this particular novel is actually taking a long time to get right. It's quite hard work, and I'm not there yet. So. But I am persevering. I shall be doing more of it. So anyway, so all of you bots and AIs and artificial intelligence, and if there are any real people out there, hello to you as well. JR's 98 hope to be in the stream for the duration, but our Virgin internet is down and I'm watching this tethered to my phone. I don't know how much data it uses. You might be able to tweak the resolution or the quality down a little bit, JR 98. I don't know if that helps or not, but it might do. And a follow-up from last week's writing grid. I have hired an editor now. My work in progress is with her until mid-May. Wow. Cool. Awesome. Well, good luck with that, Kelly. Well, I know... Not Kelly Bagler. That's the next... Just ignore me. Jan, yes, because I've read your presumably an early draft of the work in progress. It was very good indeed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the editor does with it. I think that's going to be quite good. Robs2610. How long did it take you to finish the game Doom Dark? Well, it depends on which version you're talking about. I mean, if I recall back in the sort of ZX Spectrum era when you had to save the position to cassette, probably weeks, possibly even months. Doom Dark's Revenge was a slightly curious game in the sense that sometimes you could accidentally win, which sounds a bit weird, but the way the game worked, because the AI characters could wander around and do their own thing, sometimes the baddie lady, who's called Shareth the Heartstealer, would get killed by somebody else off camera. And you just get a message one day going, Shareth's dead, you've won. And it's like, oh, okay. It was a bit of an anticlimax, that sort of game. But most of the time she came with her hordes of Ice Lords and anybody else she managed to recruit and completely wiped you out. So that usually was fairly quick. I think you usually got about 2 or 3 months, I can't remember exactly what it is, 2 or 3 months in-game time before she sort of turned up en masse and killed you. Unless you managed to do all the fiddly bits. But I played it on my retro stream probably a year ago now, and I think we played it for about 6 or 7 episodes, and then we kind of finished it. So, but yeah, I have won it kind of genuinely as well. And I had played it through a lot, trying to remind myself how it worked, and so I could write the novel about it. So there we go. But it's the novel is coming. It's hard work actually. It is quite hard work. I get to the point where I'm getting a bit kind of every so often about it, and I'm kind of like, nope, cheer myself up, keep going. It will be worth it. It's just, it's one of those creative things when you're in the midst of doing it. Sometimes it is a bit of a slog, but I'm getting there. I will get there. What am I blowing up tonight? Well, actually, no. Tonight's topic is more thoughtful, and I'm trying to avoid the existential crisis. Okay, so we're going to try and steer away from the existential crisis and stick on something that maybe not more cheerful, but at least less existential. So there we go. Fingers crossed on that one. You still need to get everyone back to the gate, so you don't win just because sheriff's. No, I think I was actually standing at the gate at one point, and it basically announced, "Sheriff's dead. Luxor's here. You've won. Congratulations." It's like, right. And I remember thinking, well, that was easy. So that was a bit weird. And I had the alcohol prepared as well. Well, I mean, we could probably get sidetracked into existential crises. I'm sure there's plenty of those to go around. But anyway, so we shall get. We're only 10 minutes in. I can't possibly get to the topic of the day. You haven't admired my pin badge. Can you see it? Can you make it out? It's probably a little bit overexposed. Who's this guy? Who's this? Who's on my hat? Who's that guy? Yes, Glenn's get it straight away. Well done. So I've got a Carl Sagan pin badge. How cool is that? No, I'll do this one especially for JL98. Look, so how close I can get to the monitor without it. It's kind of overexposing at that point blank range. There he is. There we go. Let's focus now. Carl Sagan. There we are. One of my heroes. When I'm waiting for the camera to refocus. There we go. It's actually not the best drawing of Carl Sagan, but it's a Carl Sagan pin badge for my hat. So I mean, there we are. It's cool. So I'm going through my collection of pin badges. I got some for Christmas, you see. So on the Monday stream, you guys are blessed with a bit of variety on the pin badge. The elite guys only get the elite badge, and the retro stream at the moment is only getting the old elite badge. But on Monday you are especially privileged. You get the variety. I think it was Enterprise last week, wasn't it? This week it's Carl Sagan himself. He's with us here in spirit. Okay. So there we go. So anyway, Jayton is here. Jayton 666, greetings as well. Rob's 261, my C63. I'm pretty sure it was a Commodore 64 actually. It stopped working. No, that's just disappointing. The answer is 42, so just concentrate on that and we'll all become calm. Yes, okay, we'll just zen out for a moment. There we go. Yeah. And Mondays we get the random. You do get a random badge, kind of. Well, I mean, semi-random because I sort of choose them. Sort of procedurally generated, perhaps, maybe more than actually fully random. But there we go. Do you change the badge or get a new hat for each? No, I keep the same hat. This is my sort of. This actually, I suppose this is kind of now my lucky streaming hat, or maybe it's my lucky authoring hat, because it's actually a felt hat. It's very comfortable to wear. And it would kind of be a bit useless outside because if you get a felt hat wet, it's either going to shrink or go baggy or whatever. So it's not actually really a hat you would be all that advisable wearing outside. So it's sort of I suppose it's kind of a dress up hat. So it's sort of my streaming hat now. And my kind of authoring hat. So when I go to conventions, back in the ancient mists of time, when we used to go to conventions, I've got a sort of vision of Elrond now. I was there, Gandalf. 3,000 years ago, I was there. Back in those days, do you remember those days, back in the ancient mists of time, when we actually used to meet people face to face in places? I was there, yeah. And then the pinch over here. No, I've got a single hole, a very, very single hole that I use for the pins. Is very discreet. Very discreet. What's the topic we're not talking about? We will get to the topic we're not talking about at the moment. But my mood emulator has a variable to add some randomness to selection. I suppose it does. That's right. Yeah. Full topic disclosure, so we can tell how long to keep you off topic. Right. So the topic tonight is in science fiction and fantasy. Okay, in science fiction and fantasy. So I've broadened it to fantasy because I think there might be some interesting discussion there as well. Is the heroes, okay, and the heroines and the antagonists and the protagonists and all the important people that you see in the films and the TV series have all got kind of hero roles, haven't they? They're either like the space commander or the captain, right? Or they're the plucky scientist who figures out the problem, or they're the wizard, or they're the sword wielding hero or the magician or something like that. What I want to know is what is everybody else doing? How does society work in these worlds? What's going on in the background so that people can build space? How does the economy work? What do people aspire to? What's the average person doing in a science fiction and fantasy environment? That's what I want to know. Okay. So is there anything like a dinner, Nat? A gnat. Oh, a hat. Sorry. I did a gnat. It's all right, but it's a bit small. And a pair of teeth. The C16... I really feel like I should have some alcohol at this point. Questions like this. Okay, they all stand... Red Shirts by John Scalzi, yeah. Well, that's, things like that are true, yeah. How do you think the sci-fi genre lends itself towards Elite series, and how do you think Elite Dangerous shift towards realism but detriment to benchmark sci-fi plot? Back at level, that's a very good question. Actually, that's a seriously good question, which I think I will answer in a slightly serious way. Is that I think it detracts a bit. And I've been having this debate with myself, because on this stream I have mercilessly lampooned for weeks any science fiction show which doesn't do things properly, and I've waggled my finger and I've pointed my, I've given it a stern glare, saying, that's wrong, you can't do that in space. But you need some of that suspension of disbelief and that kind of magic to make a story work, because stories aren't real life. Okay, I mean some are, but and you could argue, I suppose, some of the best stories are real events, but most stories aren't. Most stories have a start point and an end point, and real life isn't like that. It just continues. So stories are, we have the plucky hero or the plucky adventurer or the downtrodden woman or whatever it is, the antagonist is, and then or the protagonist, or then we have the antagonists who are kind of the bad guys, clearly, but we need to set them up because they've got to have meaningful motives, and all those sorts of things need to happen in the story to make it kind of an interesting thing. You've got to have people to care about and people to root for and get alongside and sympathise with, or hate or love, or all those kind of things. You need to have some passion in the story, and sometimes realism can get in the way of that. Star Trek. Star Trek is a good example. The Enterprise is a vehicle to allow the story to be told, and Star Trek, certainly in the original incarnations, the original series Next Gen, were comment on social issues of the time, but in science fiction and on a starship, so you could kind of take it away into space. And you've got to have a warp drive and a teleporter and all those other things, and they're all hand wavium. They don't exist, and but they're mechanisms to create drama and all those kind of things. And in Elite, we have an Elite, and I'm talking not just about Elite Dangerous, but Elite the whole thing, from '84 to now, is on one hand super realistic, and on the other hand it's like complete hand wavium. And there's an odd mix in Elite of this must be absolutely real, versus no, this is completely kind of made up. And sometimes I think the emphasis is too far the wrong way, because you kind of just like, well, it's just boring now. You need more passion, you need more zing, you need more life. And I would trade good story for graphics. I would trade good story for realism. I would trade good story sometimes, probably not for gameplay, because that's what games are for, but I'd certainly trade it for graphics, audio, fidelity, all that sort of stuff. I would put scale. I mean, Elite Dangerous is classic for 400 billion star systems, of which most of them are the same. So why bother? I think if Star System ever comes out, I think in some ways it may be a better decision, because it's concentrating on actually populating a lot of the worlds, rather than relying on the procedural generation to make a huge expanse of very sameness. I do like the scale. I think there's something quite awe-inspiring about it, but I would trade scale for better story. Yes, definitely. So hopefully that's an answer. So on this, it's easy to why they do real life. Support the hero. They do all the work and get bugger all the credit. So I think you're probably right. So anyway, so I will slowly steer it around to the topic of the day. Why is it the commanders who go down to the planet? Well, and is it? I mean, Star Trek is always a bit. It's kind of military, isn't it? I mean, Star Trek is a bit like some sort of naval vessel. That's sort of what it's modified after, isn't it? So you have a captain and a first officer and lieutenants, and there's a very militaristic ranking structure on the Star Trek ships, which everyone has to obey. And stories don't have an end point. They always live happily ever. Well, I mean, some of them do, don't they? Usually nowadays it's more it's more typical to have a slightly kind of bittersweet ending, isn't it? Where you have not everything is resolved, and it's not all nice and neat and tight, and they don't always live happily ever after. Some of them don't live at all. So yeah. We're not. Stories aren't real. We're not descendants of All this has happened before, and all this will happen again. So those kind of things. Waving my hands says Commander Buffer Zone. Good to see you too. Thank you very much for turning up. See, and yeah, Star Trek is more. It is actually a stage show about the starship, isn't it? But so the question is, what's everyone else doing? So I'm kind of interested. In the background. Okay, so I mean, let's just say, take any of these things. You do see this a little bit with Star Trek and Star Wars, which I think is quite nice. You sort of see the ordinary lives of everybody, and they seem to be quite humdrum, don't they? And in some ways, I think not very imaginative. I mean, Star Wars, everybody who isn't in a spaceship or doesn't have access to a spaceship seems to have a dead-end job in a bar or is running some sort of repair outfit or farming. That seems to be the other thing that they're doing. So you can work at a bar, you can run a repair operation. And you always get that sort of I'd hesitated to call it an American vibe. I think that might be a bit unfair, but everyone is as hard as nails and can spot a dodgy deal a mile off, and they're all pros at negotiating. Yeah, I need my spaceship fixed. That'll be 50 credits. Oh, I've only got 40 credits. Well, I'll do it for 45. Well, how about 42? There's always a negotiation. There's not a case of you rock up. No, the servicing for credits is 45. What about 40? No. The servicing for a spaceship is 45 credits. See, if it was set in Britain, it would be actually no. Your service is how much? Oh, all right then. You'd still pay anyway. There'd be no negotiating, like there is in Star Wars. Yeah, all this bartering stuff that happens. I don't know if that's a slightly American psyche that creeps in there or not. People in the UK, I mean, certainly that I've observed, are not very good at bargaining at all. They don't like bargaining. They find it very uncomfortable. So if somebody says it's 60 credits, then they'll go, okay, then it's 60 credits. Whereas it feels to me like all Americans are experts in bargaining. And go, 60 credits? No, I'll do it for 40 credits. Or 50 credits, or 45. Everything. I mean, I don't know. I've never noticed this in real life. When I went to America, I went into a shop. I didn't see anybody go, I want to fill up my car with fuel. That'll be 50 credits. $50, sorry, or whatever it is. I don't know how much the fuel costs. And then somebody say, "No, $50? No way! I'm going to do it for 30." I didn't see that, so maybe it's not true. Alan doesn't like bargaining. There we go. So I don't know. Maybe that is a slightly British thing that we don't like bargaining. I don't know. But looking at the wider Star Wars universe, I kind of get the impression that everybody is either in the repair business and is usually the one. When you land your spaceship, you tend to land somewhere where the first person is likely to rip you off, and then you have to go and find somebody else in order to fix the damage that the first person has done. That seems to be quite a common thing. So everyone's a dodgy mechanic in the Star Wars universe. Servicing charge will be reasonable, but towing charges are horrendous. I suppose it's a bit like looking at history. You get the first kings and queens and then generals and the aristos, and that takes up 19.8 out of the 20 volumes and 0.2 with everybody else. Americans do a lot of bargaining for things. I mean, I will bargain for some things. I just don't like paying retail price. I'm sure there's too much margin in it. Yes, I don't know. And then in Star Trek, I mean, Star Trek is supposed to be this utopian society, okay? And at least in Star Wars, I mean, people are doing things for credits or something, some sort of monetary value, and without getting too technical, it seems to be some sort of fiat currency. You can exchange it for something else. It doesn't have intrinsic value. You're not being paid in gold. You're being paid in something that you could exchange for something else. And there seem to be quite a few currencies in the Star Wars universe, but that implies an economy of some kind based on something. And I don't know my Star Trek lore, Star Wars lore, well enough to know what the if there are multiple currencies, and then how the economy works in Star Wars. Whereas in Star Trek, they claim, certainly on the Enterprise, in the kind of Picard realm. Well, I'll get onto the Ferengi, Rob. Yeah. So in the Federation, at least in the kind of core of the Federation, they claim to have abolished money. We work to better ourselves. It sounds awfully kind of like, really? You managed to do away with human nature in like 300 years? Really? We just work to better ourselves. We don't need money. So what do the people in the Federation, what's the point of work? Do they just do it because it's fun? Or what? How does that work? I mean, how do you if somebody, if in the Star Trek universe, if I'm happy just to have a flat and a holodeck and a few meals a day from the replicator, that probably doesn't cost the whole of society too much to provide. But if I want, if I want an NCC 1701-E starship at my disposal, that's a significant investment of resources to build it, and not everybody can have one of those. So at what stage does my request from that society cost too much in terms of whatever it is the Star Trek universe actually runs on? And what's to stop me from asking for an unreasonable amount of something? I want 3,000 tons of gold, but there's no money. How does it work? So anyways, I find that sort of stuff interesting. Star Trek wants both. We're the perfect socialist utopia, but also capitalist with the poor. Yeah, exactly. Gold pressed latinum. So there is kind of money in the Star Trek universe. Gold pressed latinum appeared with the Ferengi, didn't it? And they seem to use that as some sort of it's like a base to some sort of currency going on in the Star Trek universe. You can't. I think you can replicate everything else, but you can't replicate gold pressed latinum. Is that right? So it's sort of a fundamental thing that you can stockpile. And if you've got a lot of it, then you're rich. And you're back to a capitalist society again, then, aren't you? So if I want to, I don't know, take something humdrum in the Star Trek universe. If I want to do some research on something, and I need access to the the planetary something wave scanner thing. How do I go about getting that? I mean, I can't buy it. Do I just go, I've got this idea, I'd like to use this, and someone says, well, there isn't one free at the moment, you'd have to join the queue. And I said, well, I'd like to do it by next week, not in 3 months' time. So can we build another one? How does that work? How do I gather resources in a world where there isn't any money to build a big complicated thing? I'm not sure. So the economy if there is such a thing, I mean, maybe economies. Hello, please say what? Says BBO. Pina finom. I don't know what that means. That sounds like someone's trying to trick me into saying something rude. So there we are. I want 3 NCC 1701-Ds, a Borg cube, and a dozen planetary shuttles. Thanks. So if money doesn't exist, how does value work? I'd like to know how the economy is supposed to work. Whereas in the Star Wars universe, it seems to just be a sort of modified trade bartering system with some currencies that everybody's like, Imperial currency I'll accept it at a push, but I'd much rather have New Republic currency because I'm closer to them, it's easier to trade, sort of thing. And that seems to be a much more sort of general bartering thing. I want a red shirt, yeah. Red shirts will probably be on big discounts, I imagine, in the Star Trek universe. And what is it that everybody else does? Okay, so we see people on starships, right, doing starshipy things, firing phasers and investigating stellar anomalies and firing photon torpedoes, raising the shields and conducting nanoprobe analyses of things, which is all very exciting. But that's not what most of us don't serve on US naval ships, do we? So they've got missions and stuff to investigate, I'm sure, but most of us are just trying to hold down a normal job and get by. So what is life like behind the scenes on Earth? We see people wandering around the academy and it all seems jolly nice, and it's always sunny. Have you noticed? It's never raining. In most of those shows, it's always a lovely day. The sun's in the sky and a little bit of cloud, but and people are wandering around, and everyone's very kind of laid back and chilled out. So it's obviously quite a nice place to live, but it doesn't look very exciting. People just wander around, and presumably trying to think, how does anything work in this universe? And they fix the. That's right, Red Dwarf. Yes, that's a very good point. Okay, so there's an entire maintenance crew, go around fixing all the food systems. The food replicators are busted in. So that's my job. I'm food replicator fixer number 256. So maybe that's. But that implies, at least in the Star Trek universe, that there is a hierarchy of jobs. So if some poor soul is fixing the food replicator, I mean that's not fun. I mean, that can't be a great job, and not everybody can have a great job, surely, because there are jobs that need to be done that presumably hardly anybody wants to do. And the reason that we do work today, we exchange our work contributions and we receive money in exchange for work that we would rather not do. To be honest, because that's the definition of work. I'd much rather not be doing that work. But with money, I can do things that I do want to do. They have climate controls. They can just choose the weather they like. Okay, so labour in exchange for money. I mean, money is stored labour. It's kind of what it is, if you think about it, isn't it? So I will work hard for a period of time, and that gives me some numbers in a bank account, and I can exchange my numbers in a bank account for things that I like food and a place to live and Wi-Fi and computers and games and petrol and stuff that allows me to do things that I want to do. It's sort of stored labour, isn't it? Money. So I don't know. Don't forget the episode in which a group of aliens spends the whole time forcing Picard to count less than 10 lines. Yeah, well, yes, that's true as well. One character in the original Khan episode, Lady's job is historian, just seems to paint all day. Yeah, and on the Enterprise, they spent a lot of time learning music and going to music conferences. Classical music is big in the 24th century. And Chief O'Brien in Deep Space Nine in TNG, he was going mental because everything worked and there were no problems for him to solve. He likes working on Deep Space Nine because there are so many things for him to solve and he can feel useful. So there are these. There must be other jobs, and somebody must be incentivized in some way to do it. I mean, what do you get? I mean, the moment you introduce a reward, you've sort of got a currency, haven't you? Because you could, I've got 16 holodeck credits. Would you like to swap one of those for I don't know, a rice and field day or something? So how does it work? What do they? What do they do? And see money as a physical. I see money as physical time. Okay, that's an interesting, good way to look at it. There's an Asimov story where a sewage worker goes on strike and the protagonist averts a disaster by breaking the strike. Okay, cool. Which one's that? I haven't read that one. Picard owns and runs a vineyard. Yeah, so I mean, there you are. So Picard is able to have this lovely French sort of vineyard place in France, presumably. Which looks like many, many acres and a lovely old ancient house. So now there can only be so many ancient houses on Earth in France. So how does Picard get rewarded his house because it's a family thing? In which case there's still the concept of ownership, or is he given it because he's been a great captain and saved the planet from the Borg, or what? How does that work? Can you own things in Star Trek still? So those sort of things. So in economics, money is a means of exchange and a store of value. So that's it. It's exchange. It's a store of value. So can you operate a society without money, especially a big technical society, even more technical than one we have? I think that's actually quite a good question. An energy allowance to use in the replicator. Well, that's another thing, isn't it? So that's kind of like food vouchers, isn't it? Do you write for money or because you love the creativity? Well, I do write because I love the creativity. That's what I say. Now, in an ideal world, and I'm using the phrase ideal world without thinking about it too carefully, I would write full time all the time. But unfortunately, because I'm not in the ideal world, there are practicalities in terms of having to pay the mortgage and paying bills and looking after my sons and my wife and all the other, which cost money, which means I have to do other things in order to provide, the numbers in the money to go up, because the other things tend to make the money numbers go down again. And that's your perennial thing, isn't it? Is not all certainly not in our current world. Not all creative things are created equal. So you can be extremely good at, well, I'm not saying I'm extremely good, but you can be extremely good at a creative thing and not make any money from it at all. So it's not necessarily your work, and the importance of your work is not valued, the same across all the different spectrum. I mean, we have these debates all the time with, people like investment bankers can make a great deal of money. Do they add any value to society? Question. A nurse or a police officer perhaps isn't paid very much, doesn't make very much money, but is providing an extremely valuable service. So if I ever get hit by a car or run over or something, then I'll probably want to go and see a nurse, a doctor, and be rescued by an ambulance. That, to me, at the time, would be extremely important. So I don't know. So in Star Trek, I could be a holodeck writer. That sounds like quite a good fun thing, doesn't it? So that could be a job. I mean, somebody's got to write the content for the holodeck. So you get the impression that creative things still exist. But what's how would the compensation work? And is there some sort of universal basic level of support that everybody just gets? But if you want more than that, how do you achieve it? So I don't know. Thank you for the follow there, Torin Hart. Appreciate that. So it implies there are people in the Star Trek universe who should want for nothing, who actively choose to live in crappy one-room apartments and could just. Well, that's it. You see, I mean, some people love living in cities, and I've lived in a city for a short period of time. It's not me. I don't like it. I would have to have a house in the country to be happy, I suppose. Some people like living in cities, but not. If I live in a one-bedroom flat in the city in the Star Trek universe, and I decide one morning, actually, I'd be much happier with a big mansion in France with a vineyard. How do I go about getting one? So as a holodeck writer, holodeck writing would be. I think that would be quite good fun, wouldn't it? I could see myself doing that in the future. So there's a profession. I don't know how you get compensated for, but there's professions. Well, I mean, you've got all the boring stuff like maintenance crews who are fixing the warp drive and the impulse drive and presumably power converters and replicators. So there's perhaps not all of that can be automatic. So you've still got, for lack of a better word, mechanics and engineers about. But a lot of the apparatus of our current society is quite hard to imagine being around, because what would it? You kind of wouldn't need brokerage anymore, any kind of third-party go-betweens, because the computers would handle all that for you. So I wonder what everybody else is doing, and how do you plan for old age and things like that. And if in the universe of Star Trek they suddenly find themselves at war, let's say with the Borg or the Klingons or the Cardassians or something, then how do you motivate people to support a war effort? Because people are going to have to volunteer time and energy and resources to the thing, aren't they? And we've seen with COVID, when there's a crisis and you set out instructions for people to do things, they don't always do it. unless there's some sort of a stick to bash them with. So I don't know. As a holodeck writer, you go to enjoy. Yeah, if an NPC falls in a scene where the main characters are not there, do they make a sound? Yes, right. Does it matter? Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm overthinking it, which I usually do, to be fair. So, I mean, Glenn, that's a good point. Political parties and religion do motivate people without pay, because there's a sort of promise there, isn't there? A promise to the faithful in politics and religion. Religion is, I suppose, arguably you will be rewarded in the next life or the next level or the next incarnation. Your reward is not here on this realm. It's you've got some sort of reward to look forward to in some sense. And politics is very much, you have power and influence, and you're part of the people who are making a difference to the world and shaping the world to be better. But power is definitely a potential motivator as well. Lots of volunteers in World War One. So yeah, people will volunteer for things that they consider to be worth doing, I suppose. So I think that's quite interesting. Don Quixote. It's often being talked about in the various Star Trek universe that all needs are satisfied since replication made manufacturing a null cost. Everyone can have everything they need. It is more of a communist world. Okay, interesting. Each to his abilities and each to their needs. Forget capitalism. Small artisan things exist, and there is a sub-currency for that, mostly for nefarious uses. Okay, so that's interesting. So, would that work? Would that work if you gave our society today, as much food as they could ever eat, as much energy as they could ever use, and in fact, anything that you could want, you can have. I don't know. What would happen? I don't think it would work. COVID was we are taking away your freedom and you can't go outside. Big difference between that and volunteer. Yeah, well, I suppose that's true. Yeah, I mean, COVID's shown a few different things into sharp focus. So yes, it's difficult to design a whole society as a background to your story. Asimov sometimes is good at showing how. So yeah, so I mean, you don't need to do the whole thing, obviously, but I think sometimes a consideration for how your society works. One of the things I always liked with Arthur C. Clarke was he did talk about what the society was like around his story. So if you look in things like Rendezvous with Rammer and a little bit in the 2001, 2010, 2061, etc. Space Odyssey stuff, he does talk a little bit about the condition of the Earth. I mean, he gets it entirely wrong because all science fiction is wrong by default. But he does talk about, the evolution of humanity over those centuries and how it's different. And sometimes sort of retcons himself a little bit because it's gone a little bit differently to how he thought it might have. So some of those things, they do comment about the way humanity is evolving and whether we're getting any better or not. If production cost is null, why not? Well, the thing is, I mean, if you gave our society today infinite food, I mean, we in the Western world, arguably, we're not all that far away from having access to infinite food. I mean, if I want to absolutely stuff myself with, I don't know, let's take a random chocolate bar, the topic. If I want to completely stuff my face with random chocolate bars, I kind of can. So I suppose maybe there's some sort of self-regulating mean. But if you give everybody access to infinite amount of food, I mean, maybe that's the sort of problem we're facing today. I mean, they're always talking about the obesity crisis and all those things, which the cheap food is so easily available. It's actually causing us a problem. I don't know if this fact is true. Maybe somebody can look it up. But apparently, we have more people in the entire world today dying of obesity and obesity-related diseases than we actually have who are starving to death because of lack of food. I don't know if that's actually true, but I've heard this stated a couple of times recently in the last week or so. And I think it's about an order of 3. So there are 3 times, because of the Western world, there are 3 times as many people dying of obesity, i.e. overeating in some form or another, than starving to death. So we're almost in that situation. It's crazy on a world where there clearly is plenty enough food for everybody that this is happening at all. But those are the sort of things that are happening to our society. There we are. So 2.8 million people dying each year as a result of being overweight or obese. So there's a number. There's more food banks in the UK than I don't know. I must admit, these sort of stats are things that I think. But we're almost at the point where we are. Society has got so much that we're running into those sort of problems. I don't know, Chris. I mean, I've heard this. I haven't been able to verify, but it's something that kind of feeds into the discussion, so I thought I'd mention it. Naked Sun, Currents in Space are examples of Asimov's writing about. So I need to check out some of those. Thanks, Alan. I will get back to the Elves in a minute. I noticed that in the chat as well. More people die from being fat than COVID. Does that mean they're going to ban eating? Hopefully not, because I quite like eating. So imagine you have a free 3D printer that can make anything, including food, and you would want good, healthy food would be available. Yeah, so give people a choice between crappy food and healthy food at the same price point, what will they choose? I mean, we know why crappy food is much more prevalent at the moment. It's because it's cheaper at the point of consumption than healthy food is. I suppose as human beings, we're sort of genetically evolved to crave fats and sugars because they were scarce and useful things when we were, climbing around on the savannah. But nowadays, they're just everywhere. Cleonimus says crap every time. If it's not fried, it's useless. So they'll choose the tasty food. They will, and that's where the problem starts. Don't let Boris know who might try that next. Yes, I'll choose the kebab over the salad every time. Well, there you go. You see, okay, there we go. We are predisposed to choose the things that are bad for us because they taste better. It's very early science fiction. To upfront cost of food, price, and time to. Yeah. So I mean, all those things are interesting. And so I think the universe of Star Trek has got a flaw there. I don't think humanity's ready for that sort of resource availability. Sometimes the tasty food is the healthier option, though. Yep, that is good. Commander O'Connor. It proves God does not exist because if celery, if she did or he did or she did, celery would taste like chocolate. So I don't know. I mean, there you go. I mean, that's the sort of problem. So I wasn't expecting to get onto her food discussion, but those are the sort of things. If you so if my neighbour has got an infinite amount of, he can request anything he likes. What's to stop him building a massive tower block? Okay, on his property, which is right next to mine. Okay, so his freedom of being able to do whatever he likes actually contradicts my freedom of not having an office block next to me. So there needs to still be some sort of, planning permission, rights of your neighbours, things, and then you kind of get into arguing with people again, don't you? So I might want to have my French vineyard. I might want to have a shuttle pad so I can launch and take off back to the Enterprise nice and quick without having to walk or teleport to the starport. Or whatever. Whereas my neighbours just down the road, we get really, really annoyed at me flying my space shuttle over their property on the way to landing at mine. So all that sort of stuff. How does that work? So if I want a space shuttle, you can have a space shuttle, but your neighbour doesn't want you to have a space shuttle. How do I resolve that? Do we have to go to Starfleet Commanding? Well, he wants a space shuttle, but I don't want him to have a space shuttle. How do United Federation of Planning Permission. So there's still going to be administrators, I fear. There's going to be some sort of civil service, some sort of local council in the Star Trek universe that's kind of looking after these sort of issues. If I want to grow a series of landy bushes at the bottom of my driveway to kind of block the view of my neighbour's house, but it's kind of right on the edge of all that sort of stuff. So I don't know. Now I am talking politics. Maybe I should stop. Also, crappy food can be engineered to be healthy. Yes, I suppose we could do that. We could probably do anything you can't like with replicators. And then anyway, even if you do have a problem, presumably you go to the medibay and they I don't know, maybe they beam the fat out of you every so often, like a sort of what is it? Colonic ligation is the thing that you do now. You can sort of just slurp the fat out of your body. But maybe in the Star Trek universe they just effectively teleport it out. Recycle it. I don't know. And who would be doing? I mean, so all that sort of stuff. There needs to be some way to regulate people's excesses. Because otherwise everyone would have something really stupid. I mean, you know that humanity is bad like this because I mean, in the UK, they commissioned. This is a classic example, right? They commissioned a ship, an Arctic vessel, to go and explore the Arctic Circle. A proper science research vessel. Okay, it was an ice-breaking science ship to go to the Arctic Circle, do some research on behalf of Britain, and to allow Britain to make a contribution to the scientific endeavours of researching climate change and all this kind of good stuff. And somebody in the government decided it'd be a really good idea to get the British public at large to vote for the name of the ship. and actually submit some names in. And they were even more stupid in the sense that they said, we will allow you to put anything you like in, and whatever wins we will honour. I mean, it's like, you are insane. So predictably, the number one name for the ship was Boaty McBoatface. That is, taken as a whole, that is the maturity of the Great British public. Boaty McBoatface was by far the number one option for this ship. Okay, and the government was really, really rather dismayed by this, because they wanted to call it the David Attenborough, which of course, if you don't know who David Attenborough is, anyway, he's a famous sort of national treasure, we call them in the UK. Old gentleman who's done a lot of nature programs and is very well respected. Yeah, a very nice bloke. So they wanted to name the ship the David Attenborough, and that was one of the options on the vote, which came second. But number one, by a long, long way, was Boaty McBoatface. So what they eventually did is they compromised and called the main ship the David Attenborough, or the Sir David Attenborough, and the little submersible thing that kind of goes into the water and does something, right? Is called Boaty McBoatface. But that just shows you, see, is that if you give the power, if you give power to the people at large, they will abuse it. Okay, they will absolutely 100% abuse it. So I don't believe in this Star Trek. Just anyone can do anything they like, because it would be utter chaos. Wars would start because. It just would. I want a phaser. Oh, my neighbour's got a phaser. Well, you can't. What do you want a phaser for? Well, I want to shoot things. Okay. It would just be carnage. So there we go. So I think this give everybody infinite food and infinite ability is problematic. It wouldn't work in the UK, that's for sure. And the other crazy things we voted for. I mean, have you seen our government? We voted for them. So but let's not go into politics, because that gets crazy. But people vote for strange stuff, okay, which doesn't make a great deal of sense to people who think in the opposite direction. And people are very polarised, as we've already discussed at the moment. But that's the level of maturity and sophistication that the British public has at large. Boaty McBoatface. So yes, is it a dinghy or is it a submersible? It's something small. So there is a Boaty McBoatface. We did finally get our way. So people who don't know Attenborough. Well, I don't know how well he's known outside of the UK. Make Drew distract face again. Great again. So that's problematic. And then take it away. Okay, in the fantasy realm. All right, in the fantasy realm. So moving away from science fiction for a moment, go to the fantasy world. Okay, so we got wizards, right? And in most, Lord of the Rings actually is quite subdued. The one thing I really, really, really like about Lord of the Rings is that in Lord of the Rings, at least, not so much in the Hobbit films, and we don't talk about the Hobbit films because I don't like them, but in Lord of the Rings, the books and the films, Gandalf, who is actually is a high level wizard, right? Doesn't actually do a great deal of magic. If you look across the films, what does he do? Well, he talks to a moth, doesn't he? Okay, maybe that's magic. He has a crystal that he sticks on top of his staff that lights up sometimes. That's a bit magic. He can sort of open doors, I think, with a little bit of magic incantation. He's quite good at fighting, but that maybe not. But that maybe isn't magic. He at one point does have a beam of light that comes out of his staff that chases off the Nazgul. He does fireworks. Yes, that's a very good point. He blocks a Balrog with a sort of force fieldy thing, doesn't he? And that's about it. That is about it. He's not constantly, kind of Expelliarmus type magic that you see in Harry Potter. He's not that sort of wizard. He's quite low key, and I quite like that. He's quite restrained, because the problem is, if you live in a world where magic is everywhere, why would you do anything? I'll have a hamburger, cause black, Asio hamburger. Ding, poof, there it is. You wouldn't need to do anything with it. I'll have a painting of Da Vinci. Poof. So if magic is that clever, nobody would ever. So magic is problematic as well. I think magic has there must be all sorts of costs and resource limitations associated with magic. Otherwise, it would nobody would need to do anything at all. So why would anybody work in a world where magic was possible? Because they could just be full-time wizards granting people stuff all the time. There would be much that would be a sort of production line wizarding where so that doesn't make sense either. I like Lord of the Ring magic. It seems a lot more natural than classic magic. Yeah, so for me it feels it's sort of earthy magic. It's sort of connected with the deep understanding of the world and the foundations, I think. And Gandalf is a mayor, isn't it? So basically on the same level as a mayor. So yeah, he's way up at the top. I think he's a sort of second level in the Tolkien hierarchy of entities. He's right near the top, isn't he? And he still has a sword. Palpatine doesn't do a lot of Force in Star Wars. No, he just sort of sits around going cackling away, doesn't he? So yeah, in the fantasy realm, magic is always problematic. And the other thing I notice in lots of fantasy stories is they seem to be stuck in a sort of curious feudal sort of realm, a sort of Middle Ages sort of environment, but they all have roads which lead to other towns, and they quite often have fishing ports and big infrastructure of ships, and they don't appear to be trading with anybody else. So you've got to ask yourself, how does the economy work in a magical world as well? All sorts of things behind the scenes that don't make sense. And with magic, you don't know if it's going to turn back. Well, I mean, magic's very fickle. At least it is in a lot of things, isn't it? Perhaps there's a magic recourse like mana, and there's certainly an energy cost to magic. Well, there you go. See that? So, in some fantasy things, casting a spell takes either a lot of concentration or a lot of memory or a lot of energy, which seems reasonably. Therefore, you can't do it lots of times because you exhaust yourself and maybe your life forces evaporate and die. So that I think kind of makes a bit more sense if you're going to have magic like that. I mean, in the Harry Potter world, magic seems to be inexhaustible supply. You can just keep waving your wand, and the power comes out of some source that's not sort of specified. So that's interesting. And then the one thing that really bothers me in the magical realm, again, Harry Potter's really bad for this, and things like the Avengers, I suppose, are sort of sci-fi, and there's lots of other things like this. The whole beam of light thing. Okay, so picture this: you've got Harry Potter at one side, and I'm talking about Harry Potter, not the other Harry Potter. Of infamous reputation in Elite Dangerous, the original Harry Potter, and let's say Voldemort. Okay, and they're standing facing off, and there's the tense dialogue. I knew your parents, and I killed them. No, you shan't kill me. All that sort of stuff. Okay, and then they fire they point their wands at each other, and and they start gesturing, and then it's kind of all that sort of stuff, and then the beams of light come out, okay, and the beams of light hit each other and start fusing and doing stuff, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it's magic, so we go. But what really winds me up, I've transferred this loathing of this particular thing to my son because he just chuckles whenever he sees it now. Okay, is that when you're pointing your wand at your opponent, okay, a beam of whatever it is, magic or energy or whatever it is, comes out of your wand and is attempting to strike the other person, or you've got like an Avengers style magical. You can hold your hand up and some beams of stuff come out of your hand, right? Then you have to strain physically to make the beam work. So you're holding your wand like that. I need a wand. Why haven't I got a wand? I've got a pencil. That'll do. There we go. Like so, I'm holding my wand. Okay, and I have to like that to make the beam of light go better. It's like, when I'm holding up my hand with the beam of energy that's coming out, I'm straining against some force that's pushing me back from you, and the antagonist is doing the same thing. It's like this. It's like there's some physical struggle going on with the two beams of light, and it's like, why? And it just makes you struggle because you've got this little flimsy pencil or wand or whatever it is. And there's this this force that appears to be connected to the wand and the people of light, which is enough for you to physically strain against you. Well, your wand's going to snap, isn't it? It's not going to work. And with this pushing this business, really concentrating really hard. I mean, my son and I now do a little mime, actually. Whenever we see one of these things on the TV, we get up in the middle of the film. My wife has to give us the look and stop the film while we do it. As we stand up and we go, and then we go, whoa! There's not actually anything there. Because I just think it's nonsensical. So this strange, I don't know, it just makes me laugh. It's like you're a bit constipated and you're trying to push that magic through. I don't know. It's a pet hate of mine that you have to physically strain to make the magic go through. Maybe if I went to wizarding school, it'd tell me. Luckily, Luigi, catching back to the chat after all that silliness. Dark Sun is interesting as magic requires life force and overuse will kill the life. Well, that sort of makes sense. You know, there should be a cost to magic. That makes sense. There used to be a society of wizards, but they were all men, and they all died out when the Dark Lord arose because none of them would use their magic for fear of shortening their life. Here in Orkney, we have a really Hooray Potter. He makes pots in the village of Hooray. It's like the guns in Star Wars. I thought all British people had ones. actually, yes. Shh! Don't tell anyone. Don't stray too hard, you'll get hurt yet. Well, exactly. I mean, it's very dangerous. Yeah, all this wizarding. It looks physically very exhausting having a beam of light coming out of a wand or your hand or something. Maybe the magic force has lots of recoil. Okay, well maybe it does, but okay. So maybe magic has. Well, there's the thing. Maybe magic has recoil. How about wishing your baby brother who's taken away Belgog? Well, that's. I mean, that's true as well. You know, Labyrinth is we should dissect that one at some point. Why not create the magic behind the enemy and pull it toward? Well, I mean, I would. There's got to be tactical ways of dealing with it. I mean, all you need is two magicians, isn't it? One on either side. Never go into battle against an opponent unless you outnumber them, and then you can magic them from both sides. Feels good when the magic's out. This is why Earthseed magic system is great. I haven't seen that one either. The Saga of Recluse by L.E. Modestit Jr. This distortion of balance by use of magic is very well used. Okay, so I mean, people have maybe looked at that and gone, actually, this needs a bit of explanation. Maybe that's just how magic works. So magic is problematic. The other thing that's interesting and problematic in a lot of those sort of fantasies, and let's go back to the elves. Okay, so the elves live forever, effectively. And they've got to, in Tolkien's land, they're sort of leaving to go to the west, aren't they? Whilst the other races are sort of left with the sort of. And that's one thing I always remember reading in Lord of the Rings is there's a sense of real infinite sadness because the elves are leaving, and as the elves leave, the magic in the world is sort of fading slowly away, isn't it? And it will all be gone when the ring is destroyed, and the three elven rings are effectively rendered useless as well. So so that's undertone of absolute extreme sadness in Lord of the Rings, and the elves are leaving. But the elves have got infinite amount of time to do anything, and so if you've got an infinite amount of time to do anything, I wonder how you get your motivation for doing anything. I'll do that next century. Elves. I don't think elves are the source of magic. I mean, they kind of are much. I always get the impression with Lord of the Rings they're much more in tune with magic, and they've got the three elven rings, haven't they? Which are ultimately subjected to the One Ring. And Gandalf has one. Galadriel has one, and somebody at the shipyard, Círdan, is that right? I can't remember. Or is it somebody else? Who has the third elven ring? Can't remember now. Somebody will know. The elves are sort of a bit more magical than most of the other races, is the impression I get. And the elven faith is tied to the ring. So as the ring is destroyed, they diminish and become less and have to go off to the west. You're right. The elves have magic, but it's something that's sort of natural. It's imbued in the way they craft things, and it's kind of connected to nature. And those. Elrond has the other ring, does he? I can't remember. And if you've got infinite amounts of time, you better not get bored. So I mean, the elven. If you had a society like the elves, which had infinite amounts of time to do anything, either you develop quite a lot. I mean, if the elves have been around for 3,000 years since the battle of whatever that battle was, what was it called? Anyway, at the end of the Second Age, where Elrond is with who the human is who chops Sauron's ring off at the end of the Second Age, then the Battle of Dagorland. There we are. 3,000 years later, and the elves are still using bows and arrows. It's like, are the elves not able to invent anything new, or are they quite happy with the level? I mean, are the elves a society that basically has worked out that this is the pinnacle of the technology we're ever going to go with? Bows, arrows, horses, and nice rivers, and a little bit of mystical sort of singing and thing. Maybe they think they've achieved perfection, and they've stopped there. Okay, so the elves appear not to have moved their culture on for like at least 3,000 years, and possibly quite a lot longer. And 3,000 years ago, in Lord of the Rings, men had swords and trebuchets and axes and the paraphernalia of medieval war. And we're being asked to believe that technology has not moved on at all in 3,000 years. If it's not broke, don't invent steam engines. So I've always found those aspects of fantasy realms very unrealistic. It's like, why is everyone happy to stay in medieval world? So I think one of these days I've got this idea to write a fantasy story that's set where magic still exists, but it's kind of versus F-15 fighter bombers and things like that. Because all the humans have technology and all the elves are still stuck in the medieval age, and I don't know how that would work, but it'd be quite interesting. I mean, the elves should have percussion. I mean. Somebody should give the elves some technology, or even if the elves, and I can sort of buy that the elves would have stayed where they were, because maybe they've gone. We think this is perfection. We are in harmony with nature. We have all we need. We're not polluting anything. We're not destroying anything. We're in harmony with the seasons and all that sort of quite nice, sort of earthy. Almost greeny sort of stuff. Okay, we're living in harmony with nature, and nature is us, and we are nature. And I can kind of buy that for the elves. I can't buy that for men at all, or men as in the race of men is what I'm saying here, as it's portrayed in Lord of the Rings. Because they're always fighting, so they're always going to look for a way of getting one over on their opponents. So there's no way that Gondor and Rohan would be technologically stuck. Over a period of 3,000 years. That doesn't seem to be because they've got books, okay? They've got books, and they've got the ability to make great big, constructions like Minas Tirith. So if you've got that level of technology, you're going to build upon it and get better, I would have thought, in a period of 3,000 years. So I don't buy it. Why haven't they technologically evolved, and become clever? And if men are able to do it, then maybe the orcs can as well. They should be chucking nuclear weapons at each other by 3,000 years down the road from the Battle of Dagorland. I feel. Sometimes an issue with immortality can be the idea that you could do something simple. Like take a nap and wake up to find centuries apart. I have days like that, yes. Like Gandalf taking 20 years to read books about the One Ring and figure that out. And actually, yes, Frodo does that. Yeah, so I think it takes Gandalf 60 years to realise that Frodo's got the ring or something. Isn't that what the movie Bright was about? I don't know, I haven't seen that one. Shadowrun has magic, etc. in a modern setting, and Bright was a point. I'll have to check out that. Okay, that sounds quite good. Elvish culture is kind of status quo. So I can buy that for the elves. I think the elves make sense. I don't think it makes sense for the race of man, and it doesn't really make sense for the race of dwarves because they like their tech as well. They're always inventing machines, and so that would get better. They would find clever ways to do things. So Lord of the Rings is as a fantasy is sort of, and a lot of fantasies have to go with this. You basically get to the medieval period. So you've invented books, and you've invented telescopes, and you've invented lots of musical instruments. You've got to that level of tech, and then for some strange reason you stop. And that's where you stay. You stay in medieval world forever because magic. And it's, are all fantasy stories set in a particular period where before the technological revolution it used to be all magic, but now we've got steam engines. Or is it kind of fantasy realms? We kind of almost look back with maybe as it's a commentary on the social society. We look back to a pre-industrial time as wasn't it wonderful back then? Which of course it wasn't, but it was just a different set of problems. So I don't know. Elrond seems so bitter. He does seem very, very. I mean, for a chap who should be, he's seen at least. I don't know how long Elrond's been alive, but he was an adult at the time of that first battle, and that was 3,000 years ago. He doesn't seem to be at peace with himself, does he? I was there, Gandalf. When the strength of men failed. That was 3,000 years ago, and I haven't done anything about it since, other than be bitter. I was there. All that sort of stuff. You've had 3,000 years to get over this. 3,000 years. Go and see a counsellor, my friend. Get it out of your system. So men don't seem to be, elves don't seem to be very good. Maybe they hang on to their problems for a long time as well. Laser versus light for one. Shadowrun has magic, etc. in a modern setting. Okay, so I need to check some of that out. Men are greedy and desire above all. Well, that's very true. I mean, Lord of the Rings does sort of say that, doesn't it? Because they're mortal, we're driven to change things. So that's why it doesn't really make a great difference. Now, the dwarves aren't immortal, are they? In Lord of the Rings, but they live longer than men. I think they live several hundred years. Is that right? It wouldn't seem so bitter. That does seem quite funny. How long did mankind build stone monoliths, things, and use sources of power? Well, I mean, we've certainly taken a few. I mean, maybe we've gone up and regressed. There's certainly been a bit of that in our own history. If you look at real history, I mean, back we had the Roman Empire. 2,000 years ago, and that was probably more advanced technologically than where we were sort of 1,500 years later. So I can sort of buy that maybe mankind had risen up to a great height and then kind of cast down again, and we're in one of the dips. That sort of works. But there should be some sort of evidence around of a highly sophisticated civilization that's in ruins now, which you don't see in Lord of the Rings. And and I know, as usual, we're overanalyzing this, but I know usually, fantasy is escapism. It's all about just having a setting that works for the purposes of telling the story. Maybe that's enough, but it just makes me ask questions about where these things are coming from. Tolkien hated allegory, and he hated industrialization as well. So I mean, that's why you see the Shire. I mean, the Shire is a fascinating thing to analyze, actually, because the Shire is sort of, I mean, even the word Shire is a very British word. Okay, so if you don't live in the UK, you possibly won't notice the significance of the word Shire. But the word Shire is basically an area. Probably the nearest thing in America would be a county. A shire is a locale, and so in the UK you would have we have places today called Buckinghamshire, as we would say it. We have Cheshire, we have Northamptonshire. We have lots of shires in the UK. So shires are places, and they've got lots of different names. So the Shire in Lord of the Rings is very much a British thing. This is an area, and inside the Shire in Lord of the Rings, everything is rather nice. Okay, it's all green. There's lots of trees. We have the occasional party. People mind their own business. There is a pub. There's a pub. People smoke and just generally chill out and have a nice time. And most of the people live there are relatively simple and straightforward. And it's all jolly very nice, thank you very much. And we grow vegetables, and that's about it. Okay, and that's very much a British sort of cultural, ideal that exists in the minds of many, particularly English people. Actually, I think is this sort of idealised green and pleasant land that never has really existed. But it's kind of like, if we were to point at the perfect British piece of countryside, it would be green, it would be a nice sunny spring day, there would be a pub, and we'd probably be having a pint. Okay, so, and shire horses, there you go. So that's, the shire is sort of a microcosm of Britishness in the middle of this hostile Middle Earth. So that sort of thing. But okay, so catch up with the chat. The disc world. So yes, the disc world as well. That's very good. From the time of the Greeks or before to what the 1800s, people used horses and wooden ships. So we've certainly advanced technologically very fast recently. That's possibly an aberration. Very good point. Very good point. As an immortal, you can afford to be pissed off for 3,000 years. That's for sure you can. Everything done by machines, so many demons out of work. That's right, all the demons doing the little gritty bit of work. I used to love that with Disco, with the lantern machine. Instead of a computerized projector, you just have lots and lots of demons drawing images really, really fast in front of a candle. Brilliant. Elvish power to hold, guys. I mean, look. Signal. I mean, all we've taken with the right elf to sit under the right apple tree at the right moment, and boom, elves in space. Elves in space. That would be great. If you look at Warhammer 40k, elves go on a sexual drug-addicted murder spree and become evil because they're so... I think that's a danger for the elves. I mean, I think if you get seriously bored with your immortal life. Roman Empire had indoor plumbing and heated floors. You see, I haven't got indoor plumbing and heated floors today. Well, I've got indoor plumbing, but I haven't got a heated floor. Yes, we used to have Apollo moon landings and supersonic airlines. I suppose we've arguably got back because we've now got flat screen tellies and iPhones and things. But and there are ruins of human civilization. So, and yeah, you're quite right. So I mean, maybe human civilization has gone up and down and stuff in that time. Gaia's Survey says every time I visit London, I'm reminded how much I live in the Shire. So and it's kind of a thing. Mitochondria says, "Hey Drew, I want to visit the UK someday." So bits of it are nice. Choose the right bits to visit, you'll be fine. And it is war that normally drives progression. Okay, so that's interesting, isn't it, in Lord of the Rings? Because there's a lot of war going on a lot of the time. There seem to be an awful lot of battles. So any advantage you could get, you thought would be seized upon. But the technology that's used in war in Lord of the Rings seems to be stuck in medieval world. It's like, well, we won't innovate. We've got our catapults, we've got our ballistas, and we've got our rams, and we've got our big standing armies full of people with swords and pikes and riders and stuff, and we're sticking with that, thanks. I mean, one. And also they've got flying creatures which they don't seem to take advantage of. I mean, if I had an army of flying creatures, I would make sure I bred vast numbers of flying creatures and achieved complete air superiority over my opponents before I even thought about sending my armies in. Just firebomb them a bit. Let's really soften them up before you even send the armies in. They don't seem to use the flying creatures they have to tactical advantage as the way they should. And there was a bomb. Yes, that's right. You see, so I mean, Saruman. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that one. Saruman does chuck a bomb, doesn't he? Saruman, on his own, apparently, has invented gunpowder. Don't know where he got that from. And conveniently, Minas Tirith has a small weak point right in the middle of the main wall where you can stick a bomb. It's a little bit Star Warsy, that, actually. We've got a small weakness. It'll never be exploited, don't worry about it. It was. So Yeah, that whole business. But so where does Saruman learn about gunpowder from, and why does nobody else use it? Is it a secret? I don't know. Good question. There were bombs in the 2000s. Exactly right. London wouldn't be my priority. I'd rather see the countryside. So there are definitely very nice bits of the countryside. Mitochondria is definitely worth doing. Like the Dax. Yeah. So I suppose I'm guilty of this as well. But at least in my book, the priestesses. So if you haven't read Shadewood, basically they have big flying reptile things, kind of dragons, but not dragons. I'd call them something else. Because it's not a dragon. I didn't want that kind of whole dragon thing to overload the story. But basically the priestesses, what they do is they don't fight on the ground. I mean, they've got flying creatures, okay, so they've got air superiority over standing armies on the ground who don't have flying creatures. So what do? You don't engage them on the ground. You basically fly above them, totally out of range of their weaponaries, and drop fire on them. That's a great way of taking on a city. It's basically, so if you're used to defending yourself against a standing army in a normal siege, then an aerial adversary is going to be utterly devastating. And that's basically what I show in the second book, is that the one city is prepared, it's defended itself with what it thinks its best weapons. It's got standing armies and bows and arrows and all sorts of stuff. They get attacked from the air, and they're just not prepared for it, and they effectively basically just lose straight away because you can't win, because you've got no weapon that can take on these aerial creatures. You're completely outmatched. And it's sort of that felt to me a much more realistic way of doing a medieval sort of battle. I mean, it's still medieval technology there, but one side has far better capability. And so in Lord of the Rings, I mean, Sauron should have easily won. He had overwhelming traditional firepower in the form of all his armies, and he had he had the Nazgul things. I mean, I'd just get a load more of them. Okay, train the orcs to fly them, and then just firebomb the hell out of Minas Tirith. I would have won that battle, no problems at all. Okay, so yeah, that's a good point. Gandalf's got fireworks. Why doesn't Gandalf go? Those are quite good. I could use them as an offensive weapon. He just doesn't make that connection, does he? What's Gandalf doing? Makes you wonder how powerful the elven magic is. You don't really get a sense. I mean, the magic seems on one hand to be incredibly powerful, and on the next level it seems to be utterly helpless. They can't use it when they need to use it. So I don't know. I don't know. That's a good one. But why doesn't Gandalf go fireworks? Perth in Scotland is a nice place. Yeah, Scotland's just brilliant. Go to Scotland. Scotland is definitely good. In Shadewood, do the priestesses ever strain to push out the magic? They don't strain to push. Well, I suppose they do actually. Usually they're in conflict with each other when the strain happens. So if you're trying to read somebody's mind using a power, and somebody else is trying to prevent you from reading their mind using the power, then the two things are in conflict. That's how I sort of do it. So there's a concentration strain. Like you're trying to do a really, really complicated maths problem. You go, how does it work again? That sort of thing. But not a sort of, there's not a physical kind of thing in the sort of same way. Bit off topic, do you have sketches or something of the creatures? I have some of them, actually. I'm hoping, Sophia, to commission an artist to do some bits and pieces for that for me at some point in time. I need to get round to doing it. Nazgul didn't breathe fire. No, but you could take some fire bombs with you, couldn't you? I mean, all you need is a bit of oil. Or some of Saruman's explosives. That would have been perfect. So I don't know. And Glenn, yeah, they the priestesses in my books get are high out of stripping someone else's power. So there's a reason for doing that. They kind of get an effect. Small spoilers, but there we go. And so the good guys did have. Well, they had the eagles sometimes. The eagles turned up. They were a bit of a plot device. The eagles, weren't they? Oh, the eagles have turned up. Ah, right. Okay. Well, where were they for the rest of the battle? Turned up right at the end. Was the war against the necromancer going on at the same time as the war against Sauron? Well, the necromancer is Sauron, isn't he? Or at least an earlier incarnation of Sauron before he takes his full form. I think. It's been a while since I read it actually. And why don't the dwarves use gunpowder for mining? And Gandalf does make fire bombs in the Hobbit. He does. So why did you forget all this stuff? So it's very inconsistent. Yeah. So all those sort of things. So And it's easy to pick holes in these things after the event, but and I mean no disrespect to Tolkien, because he's obviously a great master of things. But it's little things like that. If you mix some of those things, I mean, Saruman. I think in hindsight, having Saruman aware of gunpowder, and maybe Gandalf being aware of gunpowder as well, is sort of a mistake, because somebody would go, well, you can blow things up. It wouldn't take long, would it? Is that Carl Sagan on my hat? It is Carl Sagan on my hat. The great and the mighty Carl Sagan. I'm a big fan of his, I suppose. I mean, obviously he's not with us anymore, sadly. But I don't want to say I was a big fan of his, because I still am a big fan of his, even though he's not around. If you see what I mean. So when Gandalf was fighting the Balrog, he actually was casting constipation spells. You shall not pass. That's wrong. And weren't there great machines of war? I don't know. I mean, Gondolin. There's the past struggles in Lord of the Rings are slightly difficult to work out. There's sometimes an impression of greater technology, but it's usually more an impression of greater magical prowess. In kind of past eras. I don't know. It still makes you wonder what the average person is doing. I mean, take Lord of the Rings, for example. So, again, you've got big standing armies in Minas Tirith, and you've got, big standing armies in other places. So, at the end of The Hobbit, armies march here, there, and everywhere. Now, moving a big army around is not easy to do. It's one of the things that I've struggled with a little bit in Doomdark's Revenge, actually, is you've got to move armies around. And what are armies? Armies are very, very, very expensive things to run, okay? If you've got 1,000 men in your army, all tromping up and down, carrying big, heavy weapons, they get hungry, okay? And some of them get sick, and some of them get ill, and you need a massive supply chain to keep an army going, okay? So who's supplying the supply chain? Where's the food coming from? And Lord of the Rings, actually, if you read the timing of it, obviously you know that they go up through the Misty Mountains, and it's actually winter. They actually travel. They leave Rivendell at the end of autumn, and the whole battle against Sauron sort of takes place in winter, going into spring. So that's not a good time to be having a battle, because nobody wants to fight in the cold, and it's hard to come by food. So where's all the food coming from? Who's growing the food? Where are the fields? You never see any well-tended fields other than in the Hobbit area in the Shire. Nobody's growing any food. There are no farmers out and about. There's no fishermen. There's no market. There's no trade. How does it all work? Where do they get food from? The elves have lembas bread. Yeah, that's all they seem to have. Who's feeding those armies? Okay. Amateurs think tactics, pros think logistics. Exactly right. So if Sauron's going to march his army all the way from Mordor to Gondor, what are those other than man flesh? What are those orcs going to eat? Maggoty old bread. That's right. There's problems with that. There isn't enough other civilization apparent. I mean, if you look at Lord of the Rings, when the characters are moving about, there's a few ruins about. There seems to be no civilization in between the cities. So Minas Tirith is a place which exists apparently on its own. Rohan, they've got what's the central place of the riders called? That's the place on top of the hill. My memory is not good. Anyway, that place. They've got Helm's Deep, which is a fortress. The elves have got a few places. You've got Lake Town. I've never understood Edoras. That's right. Well done, Gaius. Lake Town I never understood. Okay, so you've got a lake. Fine. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to have. We're going to build, at extreme expense and risk, a lake, a city, a town in the middle of a lake. Okay, we're not going to build it on the shore. That would be way too sensible. We're going to build it in the lake, where it's really difficult to evacuate it in when anything goes wrong. And it's really, really, really hard to build stable things. long term on the surface of a lake. It's like, just why isn't Lake Town on the shore? I never understood that. And they built the town on the lake after the dragon burnt their town on the mountain. But okay, but the dragon burnt the town down anyway. That's what happened. Yeah, so the dragon came and burnt the town even though it was on the lake. So it's like, I can understand them building along the shore. That sort of makes sense. But let's build that doesn't make any sense. And who, they sort of trade a little bit with the elves, don't they? Up the river, they get wine from the elves. I don't know what they give back in return. That seems to be, maybe they just give them fish and stuff. But was there a previous town on the shore before Lake Town, and that got burnt down? So they decided to build one on the lake, and that got burnt down. So what are they going to do now? Are they going to build another one even further out into the lake? Is that how it goes? It's a bit like the thinking behind the Death Star, isn't it? I tell you what, we built a Death Star with a major design flaw. Let's build another one, but we won't have that design flaw. We'll have a completely different and much worse design flaw. The dragon burning down the lake houses obviously didn't agree with time traveling, but maybe sub-aqua Lake Town. That's the way to do it. We'll build it underneath the surface of the lake, out of wood. That'll work really, really well. So yeah, Lake Town. I never really understood why Lake Town was Lake Town. The dwarves building a home in the mountains sort of made sense. But I'm not sure what everybody's trading with everybody else. There doesn't seem to be enough trade. But in between all these major towns, there doesn't seem to be any, vague, who pays taxes? Who's the mother and the brother and the sister of all the people who are in the army? Where do all those people come from? You've got thousands and thousands of men all turn up. All the riders of Rohan all assemble, and there's thousands of them. All the armies and the men of Gondor, there's thousands of them. Where are all the women and children supporting this vast army? where are they? You see a few of them in Rohan, and they're running away from a little village. So I suppose maybe there's loads and loads and loads and loads of villages that we don't actually see that are, slowly producing men for the armies of Rohan. But seems to be an awful lot of infrastructure missing to support these massive armies. You look back on the history of the UK, and we've had, back in medieval times, we never had any armies nearly as big. And even the Roman Empire didn't field armies nearly as big as the ones that you see in most fantasy stories, like Lord of the Rings. Those massive armies that you see in Lord of the Rings just don't exist because they're too big and they're impossible to move around, and they consume too much resource on the move. They just can't feed them. Thousands of men is about the best that we ever managed to do in medieval times. We've got 100,000 men standing across all armoured pikes. You can't field that many men. It's impossible. Because you can't feed them and you can't march them around, and you have to have water, and 100,000 men create quite a lot of poop as well. So you've got all those sort of logistical problems. Okay, so there you go. So there's a number of 450,000 soldiers in the Roman army at its peak, but that's the entire continent, and we couldn't bring them all together in one place to fight one battle. And it took months to plan. That's right. You could just light the watchtowers and the army would ride. It doesn't work very well. So it's all sorts of problems with that sort of stuff, which I don't think fantasy novels deal with very well. So I quite like fantasy novels that do away with the whole "we must have a big army" thing. So I must admit, I'm having to sort of switch that off a little bit for my Lords of Midnight and Doomdark's Revenge, because they're based on a very Tolkien-esque setting. But actually, in Lords of Midnight and Doomdark's Revenge, you can recruit an army of tens and tens of thousands of warriors to your cause and go on your quest to conquer the evil in those stories. And this is set in a world where the ground, everything's covered in snow. The ground is cursed into, kind of eternal winter. Who's growing all the food? In fact, where's any of the food coming from? Got these massive cities and massive fortresses that have got big armies in them, but there's nobody around to provide for them. It's like, it doesn't really work. Yeah, that's right. You had campaigning seasons. You just had to farm the rest of the year to get all the food ready. So, big logistic challenges to those sort of things. So you kind of have to just, with fantasy novels there, I think you just have to go with it. Chris says, in Sweden in the old days, each little subsection of the region was responsible for the raising and upkeep of at least one soldier to be able to call up at once occasionally. So, that sort of makes sense if you can summon them all, and it makes sense. But you just can't summon the vast numbers that fantasy novels will have us generate. And then solar-powered warriors, baking bread from the other side. So, all those sort of problems. How does society work? Now, I'm not saying you have to solve it. It's perfectly possible to have a good sci-fi and fantasy yarn without solving those problems at all. But I think it does sometimes serve you to have a little think about it. I tried with Shadewood to think, okay, well, if we got a society like this, how does it work? So basically, I did subdivide the priestesses particularly into like different castes. So they had some who were the warriors, and they were sort of at the high echelon of the society. But underneath them, there were healers, and there were administrators, and there were people who did more mundane, boring stuff that possibly isn't worthy of a novel, but they do exist in the background of the story. And the priestesses were a matriarchal society, so basically the women were in charge of everything and held all the powerful jobs. And the role of men, basically, in that society was either to be kind of an agricultural farmhand and till the land and provide the food, or you were basically breeding stock. That's basically those were the two options you had in their society. And so men were very much very, very suppressed because they didn't have, only women in this society had this strange ability that I gave them. Men didn't have it, so they were instantly a second-class citizen. And so I suppose that was me doing a bit of a role reversal in some sorts, just to sort of see what happened. And you end up with a reasonable attempt at a civilization that might sort of work. There's probably all sorts of problems with it in reality, but I'd set back and thought, well, okay, if I'm going to have a matriarchal society, how's it structured? What does it look like? And for the others, why are they in the medieval world? And one of the reasons they're in the medieval world is because they've got a culture of suppression of knowledge. It's actually considered bad to research things, and you get punished if you do. And that's a very strong kind of cultural influence for a lot of the rest of society. So that's how I kind of did it in my fantasy world. So I don't know if that is actually a good thing to make your world, your fantasy world, or your sci-fi world have a little bit more kind of feeling of, what's the word I rather like at the moment is verisimilitude. This is the word of the week for me. Verisimilitude. Okay, verisimilitude is basically a sense of truth and integrity about something. Verisimilitude. You can believe it. You can. Yeah, actually, that would probably work. That's that's a place I can sort of see working as a place. Whereas, I contrast that a little bit with the way you see things like in Elite Dangerous, for example, just to go back onto the game sort of thing. Authenticity, there you go, Chris, that's a good one. Is, according to Elite Dangerous, the universe is full of people who will, won't bat an eyelid about people being assassinated left, right and centre. If you go to every mission board on every station in the entirety of the populated Elite Dangerous universe, everybody is basically trying to kill somebody else. Go here and assassinate the pirates here and it will give you lots of money. And that seems to be perfectly acceptable behaviour in the Elite Dangerous universe. Life is cheap. Okay, so you can go out and there are assassination missions at every single station in every single port in every Elite Dangerous system. Okay, that seems to be a way of life. So on one hand, that's just like, assassination, that happens all the time. My mate Fred, he was assassinated last week. What a shame. Never mind. And then, for the flip side, if you fly your ship into the space station and you trespass over somebody else's landing pad, then you're dead, my son. You've got 30 seconds, or we're going to blow you to pieces. It's like, really? things like that to me don't quite hit the verisimilitude test. It's like doesn't feel right. Turin Hart says, I vote to be breeding stock. I think most of us probably would. Choice between being breeding stock and being the problem is that the choice isn't yours, Glenn. I think the priestesses make the choice. That's the problem. If they choose you as breeding stock, you're lucky. Otherwise, you're working on the farm. I think that's the way it works in the Shadewood world. The priestesses are pretty picky. The tricky thing is how in the midst of your plot you find time. Well, see, I chucked them away, JR1988. That's a good question, because you don't want to chuck in loads of exposition about, oh, by the way the society in this world works is that you just need to get the characters to reference it. So, for example, the way I did it in Shadewood, at least one example, is I think Kiri asks her mentor, Charis, I want to be a healer like you. And Charis basically said, well, you need to look around and see what else you might be interested in doing. You might want to be an administrator. You might want to be a healer. You might want to be a warrior. And Kiri's, no, I want to be like you. And then that way you can introduce a little bit of the world that's around the characters. And then you stop. And then maybe a couple of chapters later, you can do a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. Feed it in very slowly. And that way the flavour of the whole place slowly builds up. But only if you've worked out what that flavour is in advance, and you can go in references. Otherwise, you sort of make things up on the fly, and then you make inconsistent worlds like Star Wars and Star Trek. The beauty of it, because I, with my stuff, it's 4 books, and they're entirely mine and not subject to anybody else's interpretation. I control the rules, and then what I say is law, and that's it. Whereas as things get bigger and more complicated, more and more people get involved, then that's when the inconsistencies creep in, and you just can't keep a handle on it. So you can't blame bigger things like Elite or Star Trek or Star Wars for being inconsistent in places, because there's just too many cooks in the kitchen over time. And sometimes somebody says, we did this thing. Oh yeah, we did, didn't we? We need that not to happen now, otherwise this episode doesn't work. In Star Trek and Star Wars are full of that sort of stuff. Classically, brilliant simple example in the new Star Trek films, they establish that it's possible to beam people between planets quite easily at warp speed. So why do you need starships? And you can also bring people back from the dead by injecting them with the blood of super beings from the past. So nobody need die anymore, right? Oh, they do. It's like, you haven't thought about connecting it all. And it's harder to do stuff, okay? Yeah, if you introduce things like that, it can blow your lore to pieces if you don't do it well. And I'm very particular about that sort of thing, okay? I don't like inconsistent lore, so it annoys me when people do it. And you probably know in the past I've been annoyed by things in Elite Dangerous when I've just said, you're just busting the law. You are breaking the law just because you can't be bothered to do your homework properly. And now you've introduced something that really screws the law up. Because lots of other stuff in the past has been built on the fact that you can't do a thing, and then suddenly, oh look, you can. And Star Trek's done it. Star Wars has done it. All sorts of stuff like that. And unfortunately that does happen. I don't like it, and I will always strive in my work, in my universes, if you like, not to bust my law, because I think the law is the foundation. It's not the be-all and end-all or anything, but it's the foundation upon which you build your verisimilitude, there's my word again, and make people appreciate the world that you've got, because they can understand, they can learn the rules and go, there's no way that Drew can write them out of this problem by using that, because you're not allowed to do that in this universe. So I was very clear, for example, with the strange powers that my priestesses have in Shadewood. It's not the Force. They can't move physical objects with it, because that actually breaks the laws of physics. It's not acceptable. So they can do all sorts of weird stuff, which is explained later on how it works, but they can't break the laws of physics. So they can't move objects with the power of their minds, no matter how powerful they become, because that's not possible. You can't do that unless you go magic. And Shadewood is not magic; it's science fiction. And so you've got to be careful, and you will get it wrong. It's impossible to be perfect, but you can try, and I think that's the thing. Is the willingness to try there? I think that's the thing. Do it slow, like you said. Will the reader notice? They do. I mean, I get a lot of people sending me emails saying really appreciated the care and attention that's gone into the background of your stories, so readers do notice. Readers do notice when the background elements make sense or don't sometimes, or contradict each other. And there are definitely people out there who will, focus on all the nitty little small details about things, and take that to heart. I mean, people like me who like to pick plot holes and things, So without a planned background, little hints in there could start to sound like. So the problem is, if you don't plan out the lore, then everything that you add in on its own is quite good, but it may not add up to a consolidated whole, and it may look a little bit, hang on, the rules are changing here just to allow the plot to continue. So I didn't want a situation where I went, okay, I need to get Kiri or some other character out of a hole. She'll just use her powers to do it. So there's one particular example that gives us away where one of the characters is caught by a creature, kind of thing, that's living in a pond, and she tries to use her abilities to stop it, and it just doesn't respond. She's got no control over it whatsoever. She doesn't understand why it didn't work, and it's not until much later on that explanation is revealed. So I didn't want the powers that these women have to be a kind of we can get out of any plot contrivance that Drew cooks up. I wanted to sort of, okay, no, they're going to be in trouble sometimes, and there's no way out of it, and they're going to die because the powers don't help. They're not a panacea. They can't do everything. And mitochondria, the Star Trek stuff, and the Discovery, it was okay, but the spore drive, really, it's like, okay, we've got the warp drive which can travel across the stars really, really quickly, in time for next week's episode, and then we're going to invent another drive, which allows us to teleport anywhere in the universe instantaneously. If they had that, why wouldn't every single starship in the Federation immediately have it as well? Because it would be such a massive, massive, massive tactical advantage over any other spacefaring species. There's no way you wouldn't use it for military superiority. I'm sorry, that just doesn't make any sense. So it's like, it's just not believable. It's just silly, and it annoys me. So, hence the expression retcon. It's a retrospective continuity. I don't like retcon. I think that's. I think it's a kind of get out of jail free card. It's a cheat, retcon. If you've done your lore properly, you don't need to retcon. And if you've got something inconvenient in your lore that you'd like to retcon because, now we've got that thing that we did and now we've got to work around it. Well, tough, okay? Figure out your story despite the lore. Keep the lore consistent, and go with it and make it a feature of your universe. I mean, if you've got a thing that says, no, you can never go faster than the speed of light, work with it, okay? Work with it. Build your story around that. If you've got something that says, well, okay, yes, we've got warp drive, but it takes 6 weeks to get to Alpha Centauri or whatever it happens to be, work with it. Okay, don't suddenly just hand-waving it away, because that's you're chucking away what's unique about your universe. That annoyed me in Elite Dangerous when they retconned a bunch of stuff, and it's like you're sort of devaluing your environment a bit by kind of making it kind of like, well, it doesn't really matter, which is a shame. I think it's a shame. So I get annoyed by D. Don't get me started on D throttle again. Yeah, I get annoyed by lots of things in a sort of kind of. Sounds like, see, the last 3 Star Wars movies, why introduce a bunch of stuff that the Force can suddenly do which it couldn't do before? You don't need to do that. And the baddies in Star Wars are always pretty dumb anyway, but they achieved new heights of dumbness in those last 3 Star Wars films. I tell you what, here comes the rebel, obviously appearing to be stalling for time. I know, let's engage him in conversation. No military commander would do that. They would just blow him out of the sky. And they are just sitting there thinking, no, he's stalling for time. Why are you letting him stall for time, you idiots? So yeah, that doesn't make sense. And then all the business with the other Star Wars movie where they're following the rebels in real space. for ages and ages and ages. A lot of the movie seems to be the Empire chasing the rebels using conventional drives through space and sitting just out of range, and things like this. Like, it just looks silly. And then the hyperspace bomb thing. Okay, so suddenly we work out that hyperspace is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. If you hyperspace your ship through somebody else's ship, that's really bad. And you think, nobody figured that out before? How long has hyperspace been a thing in the Star Wars universe? I don't know. So, it's just like, let's just make some stuff up because we're being lazy with the plot. That's what that is. It's bad writing, I think. It's my humble opinion. The hardest part, the fans will notice problems with lawnmowers. Well, they will, because the fans pay attention to the lore, because the lore is important to them. They want to know how things work. They associate with characters, and characters have got to have flaws and weaknesses and things that they know and things that they don't know. And the lore of a franchise is the flavour of the franchise. So, Star Trek wouldn't be Star Trek without warp drive, impulse drive, manoeuvring thrusters, shields, red alert klaxons, weird aliens, and classical music and and conferences and counsellors and personality problems and all the things that are Star Trek. Okay, but that's Star Trek. Okay, and you don't just do away with the warp drive and the impulse drive. It's a massive stupid. Yeah, sexy green women, exactly. It's a massive, stupid thing to do to invent the spore drive. You don't need it. Star Trek has the warp drive. That's the definitive way of getting around in Star Trek. The spore drive just basically goes, Star Trek, nah, chuck all that in the bin. And the same with Star Wars, with suddenly all these weird and wacky force powers. We know what the force is. The force is a energy field that binds us all together. It allows us to see into the future a little bit and predict events. It gives us slightly, enhanced powers and great physical skill, and we can move physical objects with it. That's what the Force is. Suddenly, it allows you to have FaceTime conversations with people. I never used to be able to do that, and all these kind of weird things that the Force can suddenly do, which have never been referenced before, and you're just like, let's just add some new stuff, and that's okay to a degree, but it's got to be consistent with what's gone before, otherwise it devalues it, I think. So I don't know, there we go. Not with that attitude. You can't change the laws of physics. Well, I can try. There are more than 6 Star Wars. I'm not sure if there are, actually. Yeah. But I mean, we should definitely do a baddie. I think I might do that next week. Actually, baddies. Okay, why are baddies stupid? Okay, I don't know if you guys have come across the evil overlord list. If you haven't, Google the evil overlord list. Basically, it's a list of all the top 100 things that you mustn't do if you ever become an evil overlord in charge of something big. Okay, so it's stuff. It's stuff like don't explain the plan. And if you do want to marry the princess, marry her off screen. Don't make it into a big ceremony where you expect everyone to attend, because something will go wrong. Make sure all the ventilation tubes in your evil fortress are too small for even a child to crawl through. Sensible stuff like that. Yeah. So there's a lot of lessons to be learnt about being a baddie, which we should definitely explore. So I think that maybe will be next topic. The bad guys are always ridiculously dumb in almost virtually everything. So we need some good baddies, okay? Baddies that are kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm up against a challenge here. Yeah, don't wear a cape, okay? My particular favourite actually is the one where basically, if you are going to have a countdown device in your evil fortress, don't set it to go off at 000. Set it to go off at 425. So the goodie is basically putting his plan into operation to defeat you, and thinks he's got at least 4.5 minutes left when suddenly the entire thing explodes on him. So that's a proper baddie, that is. Okay. So we should definitely do that. I think that's next week's topic, is how to be a good baddie. Don't subcontract the vent. Don't subcontract anything. And if you're, another good one is if your henchmen report bad news, don't kill them. Listen carefully. If your trusted advisors are telling you something, there's a reason they're called trusted advisors. And why do countdown timers have visible numbers anyway? It doesn't make any sense. So I think all that kind of thing. So that stuff definitely needs to look at. Why are baddies so stupid? And it's like the good guys really being stupid in horror films. I mean, that's fine. And this thing the other thing with good guys is let's split up. Okay, let's. When has that ever helped in anything ever? Let's split up. Why? Do we need to do this at a particular time? It's like we're much better off sticking together. There's more of us. You can't be picked off one at a time. Let's split up. Why is that in any book? All right, in any story ever, unless they've got we've got 5 minutes to solve this problem. There's 10 of us, and we need to search 16 rooms. Okay, then it's permissible to split up. But otherwise, just let's split up. Why? And all evil villains tend to be British. Why is that? Why is the British accent conducive to evil, my dear? To be fair, they are at the moment. Yes, I think that's pretty fair. Do you expect me to talk? No, I expect you to die. Don't eat apples. Baddies in movies are always eating apples. Yes, that's quite good. So best baddies. So yes, we should definitely do that. So I think we've established that societies in science fiction and fantasy worlds don't make any sense at all. So they need substantial revision. We need to get back onto Tolkien and Asimov and all the rest and say, look, put some more background in. Where do all these armies get their food? Why haven't the weapons evolved over 3,000 years? What is everybody else doing while these battles are going on? Next week we should explore baddies. Okay, we should explore baddies and why baddies are so bad, so totally and utterly incompetent. Maybe they're just based on real life, like politicians. They're utterly incompetent, but we let them get away with being bad. I don't know. Baddies fall into the same problems. They love the sound of their own voices. They like explaining the plans. And they always have a fascination with bringing people over to their side. So I must convert the goodie to the dark side. No, just get more dark side people. Don't worry about trying to convert the goodie. I mean, that's just not going to work, is it? It's bad to be a bad baddie. Well, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Don't base your look on a fallen empire. All those sort of things. So. Standard hero is always a farm boy or a soldier from the sticks, and the villain has to sound classes. It's always the underdog, isn't it? Now you see, if I was a baddie and there were loads of villagers around with peasant boys, I think I'd probably go on a killing spree. Let's get rid of all the peasant boys, all the ones that look a bit disadvantaged. But any peasant boy who's lost their father and mother recently, okay, they should just be put out of their misery before they get started. Let's have everybody with parents, because that's going to stop any kind of bad uprisings. Any orphaned son or daughter who's got a strange uncle somewhere or a strange grandparent involved, that's definitely a warning sign. Okay, you need to get rid of them. Because they're obviously going to rise up and try and do you in. Exactly. Herod had the right idea, I think. If Herod had been in a fantasy novel, then there we go. You see, we're much alike, you and I. It's like, no, we're not. We're totally and utterly opposed to each other. So there we go. Anyway. The peasant boy you miss would be the one. Yeah, that's always the problem, isn't it? You can never get that. You can never get that one really annoying peasant boy with the. Yeah, but actually, no. The other way to spot the peasant boy that's going to be problematic is if he's got a monkey sidekick or something like that. If he's got a little cute animal. Actually, the girls are. The orphan girls are bad for that. If they've got a cute little animal accompany them, then you need to get them as well. And again, cute little animals are a dead giveaway. All right. Those are the ones you need to aim for. So we'll deal with the baddies next week. Anyway, I've been rambling on for far too long. Thank you. Thank you very much for your company once again. I do appreciate sitting here in front of a monitor and a camera, chattering away to my AI community, who may or may not exist. This could be entirely a figment of my imagination. That's Aladdin. That's right. Yes. Just nuke everything from orbit, so anywhere to be sure. See, that is good. That's a good approach. It's a shame they didn't do that. But yeah, we'll discuss the badness of baddies next week. That'll be good fun. Anyway, my friends, you take absolute care of yourself. Have a fantastic week, okay? Take it easy out there, because the real world is just as crazy as the imaginary ones we've been talking about. And look after yourselves. Be good. Stay safe. Do all the things that you need to do, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, take care, my friends. I will see you on Thursday for more of that Elite Dangerous storytelling stuff that we're doing. So fingers crossed, that will be good as well. So this is awesome. Take care, my friends. Be good. Have a good week. I will see you soon.